The next Flemish artists we will look at are these guys, Hubert and Jan van Eyck. And Hubert and Jan van Eyck together are responsible for the Ghent altarpiece. This altarpiece was so popular when it was unveiled in 1432 that even at the time you had to pay to see it. Well, the image that you have on the left is the altarpiece when it is closed. What you have on the right is what the altarpiece looks like when it is open. Now, it was difficult for a while to tell who painted what parts. What parts were painted by Hubert as opposed to what parts were painted by Jan van Eyck. But once you're able to get a grip on the style of Jan van Eyck, it becomes very obvious, for the most part, who painted which parts. According to the latest theory, it is thought that originally these were separate paintings, that it was a project begun by Hubert, the eldest brother, and that they were put together by Jan van Eyck, who added some of his own to it to create this altarpiece. Regardless, both brothers were definitely involved. Here's a detail of the very central part, very central panel of the altarpiece when it is open. You have Christ in the center, flanked on one side by his mother, the Virgin Mary, and then on the other side by John the Baptist. Below, you have groups of figures coming in from 4 different directions. Everybody is congregating at an altar that is set into this fabulous landscape that is typical of Flanders, that is typical of the region. Look at the detail. These, by the way, were more than likely painted by Jan van Eyck. As you see more of his work, you'll be able to tell. But look at the detail on the crown, the beard, the drapery, everything. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's stunning. Here is another work by Jan van Eyck, The Virgin with the Cannon Vanderpijl. This is a scene of elaborate and ornamental decoration, rich patterns, deep, brilliant color. Check out the carpet itself and the floor to the right and the left. Look at how the arches in the distance there lead your eye to the center. In the center, you have a very triangular Virgin Mary. Look at that triangular composition. She's like a big old red triangle. And at the point, at the apex of the triangle, is her head. And there she is, holding the Christ child on her lap. Well, remember in the Marolles altarpiece that the donor and his wife were oft in a panel, a left-hand panel, and they were peering through the open door? Well, now the donor is actually included in the scene. That's the donor, the Cannon Vanderpijl, kneeling on the right-hand side, all dressed in white. That is the donor, who now thinks he's important enough to be included in the scene itself. Look at the detail of the donor's face. If you walked into a McDonald's and saw that guy, you would recognize him. That is an amazing portrait. And he's being presented to the Virgin Mary by his patron saint, St. George, who tips his hat, his helmet, and gestures with his other hand. He's introducing Cannon Vanderpijl to the Virgin and the Christ child. On the far left-hand side, you have Saint Donation. Saint Donation is a figure that is enormous, and compositionally speaking, he is there to balance the scene, to balance the composition. Just for fun, I want to tell you what he's about because it's hilarious. You can see he's holding a wagon wheel with candles inside of it. That's one of his great attributes, one of his great symbols. Because during his lifetime, he's hanging out in Paris. A child falls into the river. And what does he do? He grabs a wheel, sticks candles in it, throws it into the river, and miraculously it hovers right around the child so that everybody can see the child and save the child. And yay! He's a hero. Go back to St. George on the far right for a moment. Back to St. George and go to the far right of the slide, just a little bit lower than the middle. You're looking at the shield that he has strapped on his back. Well, if you look very closely in the reflection on that shield, you will see a little man with something red on his head, wearing a black dress-looking thing with red tights. Keep that in mind. The reflection that you just saw in St. George's armor has got to be this guy. It's got to be the artist himself. He paints his reflection. He was, after all, standing in front of them painting the scene, right? So why not include yourself in the painting? This is Jan van Eyck's self-portrait, entitled Man in a Red Turban. And that is quite a turban, is it not? Now, we've seen portraiture of donors and altarpieces, but this is a little different because this is portraiture for portraiture's sake. There's no religious connotation here. Only the portrait of the individual in which his likeness is recorded. Wrinkles, big nose, and all. Portraiture is something that we're going to bring up until the very end of the semester. And there are different types, different styles of portraiture. This is a fantastic example of Flemish portraiture for the following reasons. Number one, you only see 3/4 of the face. 3/4 view is what that is called. You see the figure in 3/4 view. You only see 3/4 of the face. You don't see the entire face, and you do not see the face in profile. You're seeing 3/4 of it. So it's a 3/4 view. Flemish portraits also have, number two, a covered head. Not always covered like this, but a covered head nonetheless. And number three, a dark background. That dark background that is very black. So typical of Flemish portraiture, 3/4 view, covered head, dark background. One of the many things that makes this portrait so special is that it is the earliest dated portrait in which the eyes make contact with the viewer. Jan van Eyck invented this type of portraiture. The type of portraiture in which the sitter's eyes make contact with you, the viewer. Still looking at the work of Jan van Eyck. This is his painting of Giovanni Arnolfini and his bride. It is a detailed account of a humble, middle-class home. You have this beautiful reflecting chandelier with this fantastic convex mirror against the back wall. Look at the way the light falls upon those oranges that are on the windowsill. They just become these amazing globules of reflective light. It's amazing. You try it. You'll see. Giovanni Arnolfini was an Italian banker who moved to Flanders for business. And he was known for this odd hat. Kind of reminds you of the Mad Hatter's hat, doesn't it? Well, here, what we have documented is their marriage. And the occasion of marriage calls for a reverential setting, so there are some sacred overtones here. Look at how Giovanni has his hand raised because he's taking an oath. He joins hands with his bride in the center of the painting. And once you see that, you come to realize that there's this very strong centrality in the painting. Above the hand is the convex mirror on the back wall. Above that is the chandelier. Below their hands is their puppy dog. Well, the bride is dressed to the hilt. She is the idealized version of 15th century beauty. No, she is not pregnant. That was the way you were supposed to look at the time. You were supposed to gather all of your drapery up in front of you, and you could fasten it underneath your belt. So she has on this very high-waisted dress. She has all of the drapery pulled onto her stomach. Notice what's in the background of her side of the painting. The furniture behind her, the bed. Hanging off the bedpost is a broom. You're unable to see it, but on the top of that bedpost is an image of Saint Margaret praying and emerging from the mouth of a dragon. One of the stories of Saint Margaret is one in which she is swallowed up by a dragon and then barfed up. So she is from that point on regarded as one of the many saints of childbirth because she was barfed up from the belly of a dragon. I'm not making this stuff up. Seriously. Well, back to the puppy dog for a moment. Look at that puppy dog. Family dog. Let's get a better view. He's so cool. Look at him. He is not only on that central line of the painting, but he's also in the foreground of the painting, standing in front of those two figures. When something is that prominent, there's usually a reason why. It has a symbolic value. What do you call your dogs? Just sort of random dogs? We always refer to them as Fido, right? Fido comes from the Latin word fidus, meaning fidelity. So obviously fidelity is important to both husband and wife. Check out the detail of the shoes there on the right-hand side. They've taken off their shoes because they're taking a sacred oath. So there have to be some sacred overtones here. This has become a holy room, so you take off your shoes in response. Can you imagine having to wear those things? Here's a great detail of the mirror and of the chandelier as well. Go back to the mirror and you will see the backs of the husband and wife. And then in front of them you'll see a man standing in blue and then somebody else in red. Guess who? The red guy you already know is going to be Jan van Eyck. The guy in blue, however, is like the priest. The guy in blue is the one who is actually marrying the couple. Now what's so hilarious about these slides here is that if you look on the wall above the mirror itself, you can see that there's something written on there. It says, when translated, Jan van Eyck was here. Can you imagine the ego this guy has? He writes Jan van Eyck was here on somebody else's wedding portrait? The nerve! Jan van Eyck's version of the Annunciation here. Check out the detail on the right. All of the emphasis on each one of those little pearls and gems, the crown, it's over the top. Look at the brocaded velvet on the cloak. You can almost feel the texture. Jan van Eyck is thought to have invented the oil painting technique. So he's a pretty important guy. He invented the oil painting technique.